Welcome back to World of Warships with Bucketeer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Tier 7 American battleship, the USS Colorado. Sitting squarely between the USS New Mexico and the later high-tier US battleships, the USS Colorado was the last of the US standard battleships, both in-game and in reality. Back in closed beta, the ship got a bit of a bad reputation as a relative stinker in the middle of the US battleship line. However, after receiving some buffs, is that reputation still warranted? Let's take a look at the ship and find out. The Colorado class of battleships were the final ships of the U.S. standard type design philosophy. They were evolutions of the Tennessee class ships, which were themselves an evolution of the New Mexicos. The primary difference between the Colorados and the Tennessees were the replacement of the triple 14-inch gun turrets with dual 16-inch turrets. Collectively, the two ships of the Tennessee class and the three Colorados were known as the Big Five, as they were the last and largest battleships that the U.S. would build for over a decade. There was a fourth Colorado-class ship under construction, the USS Washington, but she was scrapped to comply with the Washington Naval Treaty when she was 75% complete. Aside from their guns, the Colorados were simply evolutions of the same basic design the U.S. had settled on several classes before. They used an all-or-nothing armoring scheme, though this time improved to be able to resist 16-inch gunfire. The United States preferred to build balanced battleships with armor capable of defeating their own main armament. They utilized turbo-electric drive for better fuel economy, a serious concern for a Navy expecting to operate in the Pacific. They had the same top speed and turning radius as the previous four classes of battleship. The largest change outside of the main battery was the elimination of casement guns in the hull, as they were seen more and more to be liabilities, likely to help flood the ship in rough weather or after taking battle damage than to be any real benefit against destroyers. The USS Colorado herself, BB-45, was laid down on May 29, 1919 by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation, 7 months after the end of World War I. She was launched on March 22, 1921, and formally commissioned into the U.S. Navy on August 30, 1923. The Colorado's interwar years were fairly quiet. Her maiden voyage was to Europe, showing the flag before heading back to the Pacific to join the Pacific Battle Fleet. In July of 1937, she took part in the search for Amelia Earhart. At the time, she was hosting a group of naval ROTC cadets who got a heck of a cruise. They even got to practice firing her 5-inch casement guns, which is far cooler than any field trip I had in school. In late June of 1941, the Colorado departed Hawaii for the Puget Sound Naval Yard to undergo refit. She was still being refitted when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Her refit consisted of a new superstructure, as well as increased anti-aircraft armament and added bulges on the side for increased torpedo protection and to provide enough buoyancy to carry the new loads that were being added to her. After her refit, the Colorado was deployed to the vicinity of Fiji and the New Hebrides Islands from November of 1942 until September of 1943 to help to contain the Japanese expansion towards Australia. The Colorado got her baptism of fire during the invasion of Tarawa. Tarawa was the first seriously opposed landing the Marines would face. The single largest island in the atoll was only 2 miles long and half a mile wide. Prior to this, most invasions encountered minimal resistance to the actual landing. Tarawa would set the tone for the remainder of the war. The approximately 4,700 Japanese troops on the island had fortified it heavily. On November 20th of 1943, the invasion fleet moved into position. The Japanese had 4 8-inch guns on the island that opened fire on the invasion force. The Colorado and her sister ship, the Maryland, moved in and engaged the guns directly, quickly destroying one when they hit one of its ammunition dump, and then silencing 2 more. The final gun would fire intermittently until the second day of the battle. With those defenses out of the way, the pre-invasion bombardment could begin. This first exercise in bombardment only lasted 3 hours. The Battle of Tarawa lasted for 3 days and cost the lives of nearly 1,700 U.S. Marines and sailors, with another 2,100 wounded. The Japanese garrison was nearly annihilated, with only 17 soldiers and 129 laborers being captured alive. The Navy learned quite a lot from this battle, mostly that its pre-invasion bombardment had been completely ineffectual. In spite of unloading the combined might of 17 aircraft carriers, 12 battleships, and 8 heavy cruisers on an island barely covered 1 square mile for 3 hours straight, it didn't impede the Japanese defenders at all. Later invasions would see pre-landing shellings that lasted for days. Following Tarawa, the Colorado returned to port for another refit, which consisted of improved radar sets and better anti-aircraft weaponry. In January of 1944, the Colorado set sail for the Marshall Islands and provided fire support for the invasions of both Kwajalein and the Winnetok atolls. She again returned to Puget Sound for another overhaul before heading for the Mariana Islands. She assisted with the pre-invasion sailing of Saipan and Guam before moving on to Tinian. At Tinian, the Colorado was again engaged by shore batteries, only this time it wasn't so one-sided. The Colorado suffered 22 hits and had 43 crewmen killed and 198 wounded during the shelling. None of the rounds seriously jeopardized the ship. She stayed on station and continued to provide fire support before being rotated back to the States for repair. She returned to action in time for the invasion of the Philippines, where she aided in the landings on Leyte. During this, she was hit by 2 kamikazes which killed 19 sailors and wounded 72. She again stayed on station providing fire support until no longer needed before retiring for repairs. She was back for the invasion of Okinawa, only this time she was hit in her superstructure by friendly fire. 18 of her crew were killed and 51 were wounded. At the end of August, she sailed for Japan, providing cover during the occupation of Atsugi Air Base. After the war, she was rotated home and put in reserve at the Bremerton Naval Yard. All told, during World War II, she earned 7 battle stars for her action. She was sold for scrap in July of 1959 for $612,000. All right, that's enough history. Let's take a look at the Colorado in game. Here she is, as you'll get her when you pay your credits for her. This is her 1920s configuration, and she's looking pretty good. All right, these are the modules and your upgrade options. You're probably going to want to go for the propulsion first, just because a top speed of 18.6 knots is just awful. So you're probably going to want to go with the propulsion first to get her full 21 knot top speed. Now, I would say skip the fire control upgrade initially to grab the first hull upgrade. Now, this does 2 things. First of all, she looks a little bit more like the New Mexico, which is always a good thing, but you've now got a significant boost in your AA. You're up to a rating of 41, and it's mostly a self-defense anti-aircraft ability. Most of your firepower is coming from your 20mm guns and your 5-inch guns that have been added. These 1.1-inch are, they're okay. They're not very good. Really, this is just a self-defense anti-aircraft ability, but it's solid. Also, your damage reduction for torpedoes goes from 19% stock to 37% with these new bulges added to the side of the ship. After that, I take the fire control system to get her range a little bit greater. And then last but not least, I take that last hull upgrade, which really improves your AA rating even farther by trading out those 1.1-inch guns for 40mm Bofors. And this becomes a ship that most carriers are going to want to avoid. Now, as far as your upgrades, you have the normal suite that you would see similar to the New Mexico. Main armaments modification 1 is where I would go. Then I would go again with artillery plotting room. The secondary batteries of the Colorado are not really good enough to waste the upgrade slot on, so I just stick with the artillery plotting room. Damacon 1 and Damacon 2, although I will say that steering gears modification 2 may be attractive, as this thing can be a bit of a pig to get into a turn. So that might be worth it if you just want to try to be a little more nimble. Now let's start off by taking a look at her maneuverability. This is a U.S. standard battleship, and after both the New Mexico and the New York, you should be completely used to this by now. It's got a max speed of 21 knots, it has a 640-meter turning radius, and has a rudder shift time of 16.1 seconds. Very similar to the New Mexico, except slightly longer on the rudder shift time, about 2.5 seconds. And it actually is noticeable. When you first transition over from the New Mexico, you're going to feel that this ship does not want to get into the turn quite like the New Mexico, so you're going to have to give yourself a little more leeway. Look at the concealment. The detectability range at sea is 16.7 kilometers, which compared to the other Tier 7 ships is actually pretty bad. You're going to be detected before you're going to be detecting any Nagatos, just the way it is. However, your detectability range by air is only 11.5 kilometers, which is actually quite a bit better than everybody else. All right, next let's take a look at the anti-aircraft defense for this ship. As you can see, she comes utterly festooned in 20mm Bofors cannons. They are just loaded all over the place on this ship, including these little galleries that they built on either side of the funnels to stack in 10 more of them. You would also, with the final hull upgrade, get quite a few of these Bofors, both in dual and in quad mounts, which are always nice for intermediate range anti-aircraft firepower. And last but not least, you have the usual 8 5-inch 25 caliber guns that most ships of this vintage have. They provide decent longer range anti-aircraft firepower, but by this tier, it's starting to feel a little long in the tooth. You're definitely going to be ready to get some more substantial anti-aircraft firepower here before too long. Let's talk about the ship's survivability. Once she's fully upgraded, she has 50,100 health points, which is a decent amount. It's not spectacular, it's not terrible, it just is. And you have 37% torpedo damage reduction, which is a slightly lower value than the New Mexico had, but, well, we can't all be the New Mexico. But perhaps more important than that, the armor of the ship. First thing you should notice, and the first thing I always do whenever I get a new ship, is I take a look where the Citadel is. And glory be, on the Colorado, the Citadel is completely submerged below the waterline. That is very good news. That'll make it very difficult to hit. Got an 85mm torpedo bulkhead, but once you add in the rest of the layers, there's quite a lot of steel before you ever get to that bulkhead. With a 38mm deck and a 343mm end cap. Now, once you put on the actual belt armor, you can see that you got 343mm of belt armor along the sides, plus 90 and 120mm armored decks. Just like the New Mexico, you're an all-or-nothing battleship, and you do not get citadeled very often. In general, your citadel is protected by this big slab of armor that sits directly above it that makes it very difficult to get at your citadel, and that's a good thing. All right, turret-wise, you got pretty solid barbette armor, and the faces of your turrets are 18 inches thick. Now, what this means is this ship does not take battery loss, or you don't lose turrets very often. You certainly lose them less often than you did on the New Mexico, which was kind of a thing with the New Mexico. If you played it long enough, you'll notice you lose turrets on a pretty regular basis, but you don't lose them very often with the Colorado. You just got real good armor on your turrets, especially once you turn in on a target. They're either firing at 18 inches of decently sloped armor there, or 10 inches of highly sloped armor there. So major shells are not going to be able to get to your turrets. All right, not really much to note on the rest of the ship's armor profile except the fore-end plating, and here is the bad news. The fore-end plating is only 25mm thick. It's no heavier than the New Mexico's was. And what that means is any gun 15 or 16 inches or larger is going to be able to overmatch your bow and go straight into your citadel, your armor plating that covers the front of your citadel. And I had this happen to me in one of my tomato moments when I was first playing this ship and getting used to it. I turned bow in on an Agato that I thought I was going to be able to easily take, and he opened fire broadside at me and slammed 8 shells right here and took out 18,000 hit points in a split second and sunk me. So yeah, you need to be very aware that this ship is not as tanky feeling as the New Mexico. All the ships you're going to see at both tier 8 and 9 all the battleships you see are going to be able to overmatch your bow and your stern, so you need to be aware of that and you need to be prepared for it. So with the Colorado, simply pointing your nose at a target is not the solution. All right, you're going to have to keep yourself angled fairly well to try to give yourself more effective thickness on this front of the bow and to make shots into your sides pretty useless. So this ship it doesn't feel as tanky as the New Mexico. Now let's talk about the main battery of the ship. All right, the big change that you get from the New Mexicos is we finally get 16-inch guns. And that is great news. Not so great news is you only get 2 barrels per turret, so we've only got 8 guns instead of 12. And this creates a notable issue. Now, these main battery guns have a reload time of 30 seconds, 180-degree turn time of 45 seconds, and 227 meters of dispersion. Now, you've got a maximum firing range of 16.7 kilometers, and you've got a somewhat substantial difference in velocity between armor piercing and high explosive. Now, what is the issue with the Colorado's guns? This is really where a lot of people will start bad-mouthing this ship, and it's not unwarranted. When you compare the Colorado to the New Mexico, and I know I've said this a lot, but when you compare them, the dispersion of the guns is very similar. And what can happen is a lot of times when you open fire at a target at long range, you'll have the lead right, you'll have the range right, and you'll watch the shots fall and bracket the target. And you will score no damage, and you'll have to spend 30 seconds waiting for these guns to get reloaded so you can try again. This is definitely more of an issue than it is in New Mexico. Well, why? The dispersion values are the same. You're still looking at the similar pattern shots. The problem is this ship has 4 less barrels, which means that when the New Mexico fires, you've got 12 chances for RNG to go your way and for that shell to land on target. With the Colorado, you've only got 8. So what you'll notice is a lot of times when you might have fired at a target and only got 1 or 2 hits, with the New Mexico, you get 0 with the Colorado. Yeah, it can be extremely frustrating. Now, when they hit, they do a substantial amount of damage when they actually hit. These shells all have a base armor-piercing damage of 12,400. So when you actually get those hits, they know it. The problem is you don't always get the hits. Now for your secondary battery, you have 8 of these 51 caliber 5-inch guns, pretty rapid firing, and you have, yep, there you go, those anti-aircraft guns again. They count as a secondary battery as well. And there's a kind of an interesting thing. When you get in close and you open fire with your secondary guns on a target, you'll notice that the shots from your 51 caliber guns are a flat trajectory, very quick shell, whereas your 25 caliber guns are a very slow shell that is kind of lobbed towards the target, which creates, it's just a very interesting visual tick that the ship has. So now that we've taken a look at the ship, let's head in and check out some gameplay. Alright, so here we are on a very tier 7 match on Fault Line. As you can see, this is very good matchmaking for the Colorado, and that's kind of the norm for this ship. You're going to get very good matchmaking most of the time with it being a tier 7. So right now I'm going to be heading over towards C because I like to run usually right along about the 8-9 line. And oh, here we go, enemy Fuso spotted early. Take a little bit of a speculative shot. The Colorado is obviously not a long-range sniper, but hey, got nothing else to shoot at right now. So actually this is pretty good, and yep, there's Colorado accuracy for you. Straddle the target. So, well, what you gonna do? But anyways, I'm gonna head over here towards the 8 and 9 line, not towards the normal channel on the 9-10 that most people like to go down. Oh, enemy Congo. So I'm reloaded, but that Fuso is giving me the broadside. So I'm going to focus on him. I've got 2 cruisers and my destroyers are heading down the 9-10 line. Take a look, see what they can find, and hopefully clear that out. So shots out against the Fuso, and his return fire winds up missing because I took a slight shift, and boom, there we go. Citadel. You can definitely see the Fuso's history as a former battle cruiser betraying it. That armor is just not really designed to take direct shots from battleship caliber guns. Alright, now that Fuso is actually looking like he might be cutting it too close to that island. So send some shots his way. Now that enemy destroyer is smoked up, but I'm running away from him, so, well, going in the other direction. I don't run away from destroyers, but I'm going in the other direction. Yep, there's Torps, going to be nowhere near me. Looks like he might be after the Texas, but here we go. That Fuso managed to run himself aground, which is just a nightmare scenario. So aim towards the back of the ship and put shots out after him. Right now, I've got to start getting turned to head down this channel. But shots look good against the Fuso, and there we go. Another Citadel, and the rest of the shots just don't do much at all. Still, that Fuso has taken 2 successive Citadels, so he is almost out of this game before it's ever even started. You can see the Colorado over there trying to help him out, but Fuso's just sitting there. So put the rudder hard over, cut the speed. I'm going to try to get down this slot where I intended to go. There's that enemy Mahan, And that Fuso is still sitting over there. But yeah, those are honestly never going to hit that Mayhem. That was just needed something to shoot at for the moment. Yeah, nothing going to happen there. I shorted those shots anyways. So there's the enemy Congo. And I'm not overly worried about either the Congo or the Fuso. Both of them mount small enough guns that I can turn bow in on them and not really have to worry about things. So Fuso is spotted again. He's off the rocks and he's motoring. So line things up, but honestly, trying to avoid the top of that hill, I'm pretty sure I shorted the shots. Now, this Fuso is making one of the big problems that I see people make a lot on fault line, and that's trying to cut the turn and go on the inside in that arena that is formed around the B cap, and that's terrible. Cruisers have a brutal time in that area. Really, I like to say it's destroyers only in the B cap until things start to get thinned out. So here I am actually working my way into the slot where I wanted to be, and just taking a look at the quick look at the scoreboard. That Atlanta is already dead, which makes me so very happy. Enemy Congo is coming over here, and I'm planning on having to shoot him. But first, I'm going to have to get my way around the Lion's Head. Now, the good news is my destroyers and cruisers have cleaned out the 9-10 line, so I don't have to worry about getting ambushed on the side by destroyers coming out of the slot. And right now, everybody's coming over here to get a piece of this Congo. And, you know, American standard class battleship, I'm sitting here not even up to 20 knots again. So this is one thing I will not miss about the Colorado is this top speed. It is just, yeah, it's glacial. If you've played any of the American battleships, you know what it's like. If you haven't played any of the American battleships, just try playing a match in a battleship with your throttle set to half speed and never accelerating. So here we go, starting to come around the head of the Lion, and there is the Congo broadside. Oh, this is gonna be fun. So there we go, shots out, good aim, a little forward, and decent damage. A little disappointing for having the broadside like that, but I have to put it hard over so they don't run into this island up here, which means my rear turrets are not going to be in position for a solid minute. So instead, I stay slightly angled, but mostly bow onto this Congo. He's turning towards me, so I aim a little bit higher, going for his turrets. If I can, I like to disable some of his guns. So shots out, and actually managed to take one of his gun turrets out. I know the normal thing that most people would do is go for high explosive when they're giving you the bow like that, but you can have decent success trying to snipe the turrets on a ship. Never hurts to subtract 25% of an enemy's firepower. So there's his high explosive, which sets me on fire.
The ship is on fire.
And oh, that's ouch. Here it goes. Good shots. Hit low, and he is dead. Just like that. So I could use my fire extinguisher to turn the fire out, but I'm not going to. I'm just letting my damage control ability take it. And yeah, I'm not overly worried about the fire. One fire is not a big deal in a battleship. You know, if you play a battleship, burning is a lifestyle choice. So here is my opposite number on the enemy team, this Colorado, turning in. Oh, torpedoes, so there's definitely a destroyer out in the B cap somewhere. And Colorado is still angled, but not that sharply. So send a few shots out towards him. Quick check. And, you know, 8,000 damage, 3 penetrations. That is not bad. Alright, so now I'm giving a little gas. It looks like our guys over on A have folded. They're not going to be able to get it done, but thankfully, this whole group over here that was sitting on the C cap has plenty of room to maneuver and go out there and aggressively advance on the B cap. So Colorado is still giving me the side of a ship, but he's in turn. So I raise my aim point a little bit, send out some more shots. And there's the Colorado's accuracy. So again, not one of the Colorado's endearing traits, but not as bad as it used to be. So he's right now sailing away from me, so all I've got is the rear end of his ship to shoot at. Got an enemy Nuremberg and a Furutaka sitting out there, so some potential targets once this guy's dealt with. So there we go. Another quick check of the situation. Shots out. Oh, there's that destroyer. And that Colorado's not moving nearly as fast as I thought he was. And that Mitsuki is on full health. So that's not a good thing. Rear turret's coming around. Adjusting my aim. And oh, decent hit. Another decent hit, and leaves him on a sliver of health for the Warspite to get. That happens a lot in battleships. Something I've found is when you're in a battleship, I tend to do a lot of damage. I'll shave off 80%, 90% of an enemy's health, and then the rest of my team will finish them off. Which I don't begrudge them. I don't begrudge them the kills. I don't get sanctimonious about people ninjaing kills. But it's funny. I'll go in there. I'll knock 60% off multiple ships, get no kills for the game. So, yeah, what you gonna do? I designate the Mitsuki for my secondaries, but like I said in the main review, the secondaries of the Colorado are present. They exist, but between their accuracy and some of their other issues, don't count on them. So now that I'm getting close to this Mitsuki, I'm going to start maneuvering a little bit since I'm expecting torpedoes to be coming somewhere. Enemy Nuremberg. Can't hit him. He's behind the island. So right now we're just going to move up and help finish off the cap in the B point. And you get a surprisingly large amount of experience for capping points, and that's something that a lot of people that you need to keep in mind. You can get a lot of XP for capping. And one of the things that I'm doing here is I'm trying to keep advancing towards the enemy. I haven't stopped. I haven't turned away from anybody. I've kept my bow either where I wanted to go, the 8-9 line, and now I've turned in towards where the enemy is, because if you're a battleship, you're going to do your team much more good if you're in the front, pushing, taking the hits, tanking the damage, and providing that support that the cruisers and destroyers need. Right now, this enemy Scharnhorst is just sitting over there behind the island. I honestly have no idea what he's doing, because he is not going to move very much from that point for the entire rest of the game. So here's the Furutaka. Looks like he's going to come poke his nose in here, see what he can do. At this point, we are definitely well ahead on points, but there's enough ships left that it's not a sure thing. So shots out against the Furutaka, leads good. He is broadside, and there we go. 4 over pins, and they still do 8,300 damage. Whew. Alright, so I'm chopping my throttle, trying to turn. Don't need to go full speed into these guys because both of them seem to be willing to let me have their broadsides. So there's the Furutaka. Get the level, get the lead. Those shots hopefully loop them right over the mountain. And there we go. A Citadel, 4 over pins, and took him completely out of the game. Alright, so this Arizona is getting a lot of attention. The Nuremberg is dealing with our Nuremberg over there, and I don't know how much of good I'm going to be able to do with against 2 cruisers that are maneuvering hard. Oh, that Arizona managed to dodge them, but I am not going to manage to dodge this one. And that one hurt and starts flooding, which I immediately damage control and then start repairing the damage. And I'm going to trade some paint with the Arizona. Alright, so the only obvious target that is presenting itself is this New Mexico over here. And this poor unfortunate soul is more or less stock. So, I love the New Mexico. I don't love the stock New Mexico.
Confirmed penetration.
So, like I said, you're not going to see Citadels against New Mexico, but you're going to get plenty of good, solid penetrating hits. So, I just feel so bad for this New Mexico. He's over here by himself. The scores are ticking down. This will probably be the last shots I get. And yeah, he's just going to sit there and offer me his broadside, so I'll take it. A few more shots. Ooh, another little bit of damage. A little bit more, and that's the game. Alright, so that was a pretty average game in my Colorado. Let's see. Victory, obviously. 2 kills, 46 target hits, and 118,000 damage. Top of the team with almost 1,500 base XP, which is, it's a solid win. I'm not going to say no to that. And as you can see, sunk the Congo with 25,000 damage, and the Furitaka did a ton of damage to that Fruso that was broadside and got stuck, and the New Mexico. And that is the USS Colorado, and I have to say, I enjoyed my time with this ship. She's not nearly as bad as people like to make it out to be. She's definitely different from the New Mexico. She's not as tanky, and her guns tend to be a little bit more finicky just because of the lower number of shells you sling. But on the whole, she's a perfectly serviceable ship. That said, I didn't really form the attachment to her that I did with the USS New Mexico, and as such, I think I'm probably going to wind up selling this ship off to move on to the next one.